Hi everyone, welcome back to Womanlyyy. So, in the last few videos, I talked to you about PTSD, what it is, how can it be diagnosed, what are the symptoms, and the treatment options available with different clinics and doctors. So, I'm sure by now you have learned pretty much the basics of PTSD, right? But I thought there's one area that needs a lot more attention and a separate video for itself. That is PTSD among the survivors of rape and sexual assault. Because this indeed statistically is the largest group of PTSD survivors. So let's just think about a road accident first. Let's say someone goes through a road accident, right? They get injured, they're taken to the hospital, and the doctors tell them that they might take from anywhere from up to 2 days to 2 months or 20 months to recover. There is a timeline, there is an injury that is visible, there is a treatment. But when someone goes through rape, there may or may not be physical scars to see the visible impact of the rape, but there most often will be the emotional scars which become the PTSD for that person. The physical hurt can be mended, but the inner pain takes a huge, very, very long time. And it is the hardest to deal with because it's not like a surgery, there's no set amount of time, and the scars, the emotions can be triggered anytime, anywhere. Unlike what most people think rape or sexual assault is, the largest number of sexual assaults are committed by people the victims know, which means about somewhere between 90 to 95% depending on the countries. Sexual assault is not committed by the stranger who we fear in a dark alley with a knife in his hand that could pin down anyone, but rather people we know, friends, neighbors, doctors, teachers, husbands. Marital rape is one of the major ones in there. So what happens is when these people rape their victims, obviously there may not be an excessive use of a weapon or physical assault, because of course they would be afraid that they would get caught easily. So what they use for manipulating their victims is psychological manipulation. They do not use a gun and hold it to your head and say, do this and that, otherwise I'll rape you. They rather use manipulation because that is how it works in relationships where there's trust. Hence, the mental response of a victim of rape in that situation is a lot more emotional than physical. But sadly, people do not see that. Just because it's not visible, it does not mean it does not deserve validation from any of us. Just because a rape is not physically violent, it doesn't mean that the impact of such rape is any less. Symptoms of PTSD in a victim of rape may come anywhere between right then and there to sometimes even 50 years later. The most worst part of such an experience for a survivor is when there's pain, when the pain is not acknowledged, heard, respected, or understood by the people who are around them or the legal or the justice system. Obviously, denial plays a great part in here, but the put downs, the dismissal of pain, the misdiagnosis, and any other forms of secondary wounding keep the survivors stuck. So even if they could have healed, they do not get the chance to heal. Not to mention our society's way of dealing with a rape survivor, which is always victim blaming and denying their experience, which is one reason why survivors choose to stay quiet about their experience and they do not report the rape or sexual assault, and that just makes them experience the whole thing over and over again. Actually, that completely erases their faith in the justice system or that there's anything fair in the world, and they go to their extreme levels of survival skills. They often feel disassociated, disconnected, and numb from the reality. They shut down their feelings, they shut down themselves from all their family and friends. Thinking about what they have been through is actually so painful for some survivors. They wind up avoiding to think about, feeling, or doing anything that reminds them of the trauma. For example, if they feel like the trauma was their fault, they may spend the rest of their life having to be right so they won't ever be at fault again. If they were happy when the trauma hit, they may avoid happiness forever. So, continuing with the PTSD, I've already mentioned the symptoms often present in PTSD to you in the last few videos. In this one, I want to talk specifically about the symptoms present in rape trauma victims. Intense fear, helplessness, or horror. Repeated and distressing recollections of the event, including images, thoughts, or perceptions. They would be unable to distinguish between past events and reality, and these are often called flashbacks that I talked to you about in the second video. They might have distressing or frightening dreams about the event. They would be associating various words, happenings, or triggers to the actual event, which would then cause a flashback. They would avoid anything that may trigger a flashback, including not talking about the attack itself. They would pretend it never happened, and an inability to recall anything about the attack, which is also denial. They might have a feeling of numbness, detachment, or unrealness, the disassociation thing that I mentioned. They may obviously have a loss of appetite or a change in eating patterns. They may have feelings of bitterness and morbid hatred towards the person who harmed them, which is obviously very natural. And this would be combined with a preoccupation of how to harm or humiliate them. That would be accompanied with a feeling of deep embarrassment or shame or self-blame for whatever happened. They would feel dirty or disgusting. They would also have a low self-esteem and low confidence. They might be more irritable than usual. They would have outbursts of anger and crying and mood swings. Obviously, they would lack trust in anyone, even close family members or partners. They would avoid being touched or shying away from loved ones. Sudden movements may startle them. They would be jumpy. They would lack concentration. They would experience change in sleeping patterns. Sometimes they would sleep a lot. Sometimes they would completely lack any sleep at all. They would feel depressed and isolated for long periods of time. They would lack emotion or inability to feel love or care about anything at all, and in their mind they would be going over the event again and again, and every time they would have different reactions to it. Recovery from PTSD for a rape survivor is a long and hard journey. I'll tell that to you very honestly, blatantly. And though it does take a long time, it does get better according to experts. Nevertheless, it is a slow process. The state of almost constant psychological arousal, which many trauma survivors live in, makes it so difficult for them to take in the kind of information needed to heal. So what happens is, it's just their brain chemistry. It is not resistance or stubbornness on their part. People can talk about changing, but all survivors may see is their lips moving. The words and concepts make no sense at all. They are incapable of taking what is being said on board because they are too busy taking in information for their survival. So things like who is in the room, where are they sitting, where is the door, which is the quickest way out, they just look hostile or friendly, or how are they reacting to me? These are the only things their minds might be stuck on. So until they start to feel safe, a survivor won't be able to react to anything or anyone. They have to feel safe and feel as though there is an element of trust there. when they have been treated with respect, not discounted, not pushed to hurry up and recover, which are secondary wounding experiences and make PTSD worse, way worse, they will feel safe and know it because they will be able to hear and understand what the therapist or the group is saying in any way. And that is when they can begin to understand and protect themselves from triggers. They can learn how to handle emotions such as anger and fear. Survivors can develop the capacity to respond rather than react, like having a pause button instead of an on-off switch. Searching for the right help is really important. You need to be comfortable enough with the therapist or the group. On the other hand, searching for the perfect group or therapist who will never make a mistake can put off recovery for life. So these are the two things that you may need to consider. There are many forms of therapy available, and two of them that I mentioned in the last video is the CBT and the EDMR. The cognitive behavioral therapy involves focusing on ways of correcting the survivor's painful and often intrusive patterns of behavior and thoughts. This is achieved through teaching them relaxation techniques and examining their mental process. This can involve exposing the survivor to certain triggers in a controlled environment until they are desensitized to the trigger and is no longer afraid of the situation. Obviously, this is kind of really challenging for some survivors, and it will take a long time to get used to it. The other psychodynamic psychotherapy tends to focus on helping the survivor to look closely at the way behavior and experience during their traumatic experience violated them. Often the way a survivor differentiated between their individual personal values and the reality of what they experienced during the traumatic event can result in PTSD. This therapy aims to resolve the conscious and unconscious conflicts that evolve from the trauma. They obviously also work on building self-confidence and esteem, self-control, and an all-round renewed pride in themselves and their abilities. Now, obviously, each person heals in their own way, and there are no hard and fast rules, just as there is no pill that can cure PTSD. Yes, drugs can be used to help with the side effects, but like helping sleeplessness or hyperarousal. Unfortunately, there is no simple, clear-cut solution for such a complex phenomenon, but I firmly believe the survivors have to confront what has happened to them, and by repeating this confrontation, learn to accept the trauma as part of their past. There is no magic wand. However, counseling and therapy can help to find an easier path through the trauma and set you on the path to healing. So by this I end my last video on the series of PTSD. If you have any questions, please feel free to write to me or consult your local PTSD trauma clinics or your GPs or your doctors or therapists, whoever you can. If you can afford, if you have access to free healthcare and you can afford therapists, then go for it, definitely. The other two options, the free options that I can recommend are firstly joining some of the Facebook groups that are meant specifically for survivors of rape and sexual assault. They are very helpful. They can help you find a group of people who can understand you, who can try to help you in ways that your family and friends cannot, because obviously they have not gone through what you have, so they would have different reactions or different feelings towards your experience. So if you're really lonely, you may need to vent your feelings out, and do that finding a safe space, and that could be even online because that would be free. The second thing that I can say is that I am there to listen to you. I am not an expert in any of these things by certificate, but I have read and done enough research on my PhD level about these things. So if you have any questions and if you think you need someone to listen to and someone to help you through with your experience, please feel free to reach me on any of the platforms. I never charge you for anything, but I think I have helped quite a lot of people to go through their experiences, and I'd love to help you out. And if you think there's someone else who could use this information, please share it with them and raise awareness about PTSD. And the last thing that I want to say is please stop victim blaming survivors of rape.